This might be for life. Yeah. This might be for life. Stand up when the chief is here. Hands up. Yeah, the chief is here. Stand up when the chief is here. Hands up. Yeah, the chief is here. Yeah. This might be for life.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. I have been outcooled today, and I'm saying it up front so I don't get messages from people saying I've been outcooled. And it's GG Alcock. And GG I met relatively recently, a couple of weeks ago in the Drakensberg. He outcooled me there. He's outcooling me today. I admit it. I accept it. And I don't even know how to best introduce GG, but think of me and my life, and think of another white guy, a little bit younger than me, actually 7 years younger than me, the completely different life. Think about that. And here we are as friends on a podcast. GG, welcome.
Hi, Rob. Thank you. I'm not so sure about outcooling you, but I take the compliment.
So the most important thing is, and I know the answer, GG. I mean, you have a real name, but how the hell do you get called? Why can't I be RH?
Yeah, so I guess my background, my parents were political activists, and they brought us up in a mud hut in a Zulu village, and with just like the Zulus, no running water, no electricity, incredibly poor, and my parents were fighting the government forced removals at the time I was born. I was actually christened Mark. And very Calvinistic, and my parents were fighting forced removals. And in Zulu, you're either named after a characteristic or you're named after an event. And my brother is called Makonya, which means to make a loud noise, which is true. I was named after the government forced removals, which my parents were fighting. I was on my mother's hip when they were trying to stop the government bulldozing people's homes and loading them up onto these trucks. And it just so happened that the registration plate of the government vehicle was GG. So I was named after Iskatiska GG, which is the time of GG. And in fact, there's a Johnny Clegg song, Wenzanu GG aganagi nognaga tatu muziga baba ulahle fusini, which means...
I know what it means, yeah.
Basically means... what's GG doing is taking my father's home and throwing it out into the veld. And I used to have people singing this along to me all the time when I was a kid. But I say, I was the first personalized number plate in this country.
Definitely. And you speak absolutely fluent Zulu. I mean, you probably were speaking more Zulu than you were English growing up.
Yeah, so it was basically our primary language. My father spoke to us in Zulu. All the Zulus spoke to us and in Zulu. And my mother used to actually struggle because we spoke English with a Zulu accent. We used to talk about the moon and things like that. And she used to try and correct us. And very lucky, I often, when I'm speaking Zulu, and someone's asked me the other day if I dream in Zulu, and sometimes I do. So a great privilege.
That's incredible. And you were homeschooled by your mother. Just give us a bit of your schooling, because you are very well educated and very smart. It's extraordinary what a start you got.
Yeah, so my mother is an intellectual. She's written books, and she was a journalist for the various newspapers, Daily News, Star, Witness, and so on. And she was told to go and interview this crazy guy who was my father, and she was 20 years younger. She was quite politically aware, and in fact, she was one of the last people to see Mandela before he's arrested in Howick. She was smuggled into Edendale to his talk by political activists who were her friends. Some of her friends were people like Harry Gwala, who became this warlord. Anyway, so yeah, she met my father, who was this kind of, I guess, activist, community worker, trouble causer, according to the government. And anyway, the kind of rest, I guess, is history. They got married with Gaja Buthelezi was best man at my father's wedding, and they had the reception at Alan Payton's property because and they didn't have alcohol because blacks and whites weren't allowed to have drink at the same time. So anyway, they then literally lived this life of poverty, and you know, kind of not it was this kind of mission that they weren't religious or anything, so yeah, we had this mud hut next to the Tugela River in Msinga. People often say, "Where's Msinga?"
Where is Msinga?
It's right next door to Nkandla, you know. So suddenly I can people know where Msinga is now. Yeah, we had a kind of one little mud hut room that we shared, and
amazing.
And outside we had a gas stove under an acacia tree, and that was our kitchen. No fridge or anything, just a gas stove. And we got our water from the Tugela River and washed in the Tugela River. And then my mother taught us my father took a large stone slab and put it under another acacia tree, and that was our school bench. And my mother taught us there. And we'd start really early, 6 in the morning or 5 in the morning in summer, and she'd teach us. And then about like 10 o'clock we were finished, and we'd go off into the mountains herding goats and stick fighting and doing what Zulu youngsters do. And that was kind of the primary part of our lives.
How old's your brother? Is he a year apart?
He's younger than me. He's still doing community work in Msinga. I'm the capitalist, he's the socialist, you know. So
well, at least you got one of each. That's amazing. And until what age did you get homeschooled by your mum under a acacia tree? At some point you had to be pulled into formal education.
So the government basically, we were always in trouble with my parents were with the government, and they really saw him as a trouble causer. And actually, he was assassinated by the police when I was about 15 for his troubles. But when I was my first year of high school, we were told by the government, or my parents were told, that we needed to be exposed to more white kids, and they were not going to give them permission to continue our education at home. My father said, well, they're exposed to thousands of Zulu kids, and that wasn't the kids the government wanted us exposed to. And so we had to go to high school. My father had friends in high places who said, send them to Michael House.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I kind of wonder what would have happened if I'd ended up in Michael House. But my father said, you know, I want them to be brought up prepared for a life of the, you know, real Africa. And so sent us to the local high school, Greytown High School, which sometimes people say grey, and I say yes, but Greytown High School was a little farm school. The main kids at the school's parents were either local farmers who my father was fighting with, or local policemen who my father was fighting with. So we had an extremely difficult but interesting, I guess.
And did you have any white buddies growing up, or were they all Zulus?
So they were mainly all Zulus. Once I went to school, you know, we had a few. So Greytown was quite interesting. It was one of those schools where if you were expelled more than 2 times, the last school you would go to was Greytown. So I ended up with the only friends I made, or the main friends I made, white friends, were kids who had been expelled in places like the Bluff and Durban, and were these tough kind of rebels who were here the end of the line. And so we all we were outcasts. So we all kind of outcasts from a white community. So those were my friends, but I was a weekly boarder, and it was, and I could, you know, I was always desperate to go home on the weekends to where I saw as my real kind of community.
I mean, I don't know anyone else that's had that story. And because you're 53 years old, you got drafted into the army like I did.
Yeah. So the interesting thing was, I was incredibly, I mean, by the time I finished matric, my father had been assassinated by the police, and I was very strongly political. I saw myself as kind of ANC, if anything, and very definitely kind of UDF orientated at the time. And then, of course, I got my call-up papers, and there was this discussion about what to do. And of course, I spoke with all my Zulu elders in Msinga. And Msinga is famous for being one of the most tribal, warrior-like districts. The Nkunu and the Mthembu tribes are known as one of the most warlike. They fought Shaka, they fought Dingaan, and so on. So I was brought up by the chief Nduna, who's like the prime minister of the Nkunu and the Mthembu tribes, both sides, one Majozi, another guy Ngongo. And so I went to them and I said, I've been called up for the army, and what could I do? And they were like, bring us ammo.
I love that answer. Bring us ammo.
And I wasn't, so they were like, so what's the issue, And then I wasn't religious in any way, and I certainly wasn't a pacifist, having grown up in a Zulu place. So I went, and I loved the army. It was, I loved the. I was in the infantry. I was in Grahamstown and 6 SI, and it all went great. And I was one of their best soldiers. I could run like mad. The bushcraft. I loved shooting. Everything that
your spear work was phenomenal.
and I could always get favors from the black chefs and things like that, because I chat to them in Xhosa, which is almost the same as Zulu. And of course, then they decided to send us to Duncan Village in the Eastern Cape to do township duty. Because the one thing I didn't want to do was to go to townships. So I asked to be moved from the company that was going to the townships to the one that was going to the border, and they refused. And so I turned down. I refused to do township duty and was punished with lots of DB and lots of other things and threats of prison and so on. DB was cool because they made me run around the block and etc. But they felt kind of sorry for me because I was this really great troop, The commandant called me and said, Alcock, you're one of my best soldiers. What's this? The communist.
What's wrong with you? Yeah.
And I kind of told them about my mother and living alone in the Msinga, and they gave me a compassionate transfer to military intelligence. So, and I spent the rest of my time there, and then, funny enough, I ended up actually going to the townships when I did camps, which was very interesting.
And GG, I've just noticed there's a message from Ard Matthews, just Ginger. He says Bluff, Durban, and the house. So Ard must have been end of the line too. And then GG, you became a capitalist. But I mean, I guess the story is probably a bit more organic than that. You know the informal world, the informal economy, the townships better than anyone I've ever heard of. And it must have been obvious to you that there's a huge opportunity there on the one hand, but there's a lot of good news. And I'd love the people on this show to hear the good news, because I'm a bit of doom and gloom at the moment, and they know that. But you really have an uplifting story. You're like, forget the formal economy, the action's over here. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so I guess I saw there was a question, would I vote ANC? So my move to the, I finished the army and I moved to I got a job in a NGO doing community work, and I was relatively active as a kind of political activist. And then it reached a stage where the ANC was unbanned, where I suddenly knew that the ANC and the UDF and all of that group as a resistance organization were fundamentally different to them as a elections organization. and I was incredibly disillusioned, and I literally dropped everything, hitchhiked to Johannesburg. I didn't have much, and hung out with a friend in Yeovil. Spent most of my time in the migrant worker hostels, the massive Zulu migrant worker hostels on the edge of downtown Joburg, Denver, George Goch, where all my Zulu buddies, everyone moves to what they call Gwandonga Zatuma. Gwandonga Zatuma means the place where the walls thunder, which is the name for Johannesburg. And the first thing I started doing, I started setting up little businesses. And the one was to set up phone booths in the times before cell phones. And when you still had the Telkom tiki boxes that never worked, there was a thriving business for having these phones where you could go and phone and pay X number of units. And I started setting them up in the townships, in Alexandra, in Soweto, in the hostels. I got my Msinga boys who came there, and they were all well armed and tough as nails, and they made sure that the money was safe and people paid for their calls. And that was kind of my intro to the informal township sector. And kind of long story short, I ended up setting up a business called Mina Nawe, which means you and I. It was the first marketing business to focus on the mass market and the township markets. And it was just like suddenly this incredible scale of this informal township economy. And I called it Garcinomics because I don't like the term informal economy, because it implies small scale, unsophisticated, unstructured, low margin, and so on. And it's a huge sector. So Garcinomics, obviously Garci from the word for township, Ekasi, or from Lokasi in Afrikaans. And I wrote a book, Garcinomics, and then later, more recently, Garcinomic Revolution. But if you look at that sector, I mean, just one of the kind of examples is I was asked by Parmalat to launch cheese slices into the townships at a time when cheese didn't exist in the townships in any format. Rich black kids were called cheese boys or cheese girls. And I launched cheese slices for Parmalat into something called a quarter, which is a quarter loaf of bread with slap chips and so on, and into amagwinya or vetkoek. And we built a 2.5 billion rand a year business for Parmalat in cheese slices. And in fact, we created a 4 billion rand a year business sector for cheese slices across different brands. And that's just one example of the stuff I did. And if you look at that sector, I mean, the Garci course, as I call it, the township fast food sector, which includes Gordas, Shisanyamas, Amabledi, and all sorts, is worth 90 billion rand a year, 50,000 outlets. Over and above that, you have the Spaza sector, which is about 100,000 outlets, turning over 150 billion rand a year. The Muti sector, I've launched a range of premium African Muti products. I offered you the libido one, but you wouldn't accept.
GG, my wife says, take it, but don't admit you take it.
Yeah, the herbal Muti industry in South Africa. In fact, in Garcinomics, I wrote about Muti, and I said it was worth 3 billion rand at the time. And that was in 2014. In 2018, 4 universities did some research and remeasured it to be worth 18 billion rand a year, with 150,000 traders and Muti shops. Hair salons, 10 billion rand a year. And there's a multitude of these different sectors. There's 80,000 odd Garci mechanics. There's a catering sector, the hawker sector, 500,000 hawkers, and if you look at things like the Joburg Fresh Produce Market, which is selling fresh fruit and vegetables, they turn over about 5 billion rand a year, and and of that 5 billion rand a year, 60% of that turnover is going to the informal economy. These are hawkers, quarter outlets, and so on. And I mean, just to give a sense of that scale, I was in the Business for South Africa, one of the SMME forum, when the first lockdown happened, and of course the government said spazas cannot open and hawkers cannot sell vegetables, which just was absurd. Take a taxi to the ShopRite in the fruit and veg city. Don't walk down the road to your spaza or hawker. But in those 2 days, and we fought it, eventually the government opened it up. But in those first 2 days of lockdown, when the hawkers were not allowed to stock up at the fresh produce market, they lost 40% of their turnover. I mean, these are just some of the things that indicate the massive scale of that sector, and yet it's invisible. It's not counted in employment figures. It's not catered for. It's not empowered.
So this 43% unemployment is not really a correct number, because people are natural entrepreneurs. The informal or Kasi economy is huge. Teddy Kuzwayo, who's a Michael House old boy, wanted me to do this in Zulu. No chance. Teddy said, growing up in the township myself, you were considered a cheese boy if you could afford to buy a maguinha with cheese. The rest of us could only afford polony. You know what happened there. Yep. Yeah. But GG, tell us, you also mentioned people think that these businesses are unsophisticated. Talk about the sophistication and maybe the element of technology that's coming in, and mention Yebo Fresh, because Jessica's one of our family and we're a big fan of her company, which I believe you've invested in.
Yeah. So I think, the tendency is about this kind of, if it's informal, therefore it's unstructured and unsophisticated, low technology and so on. I mean, I'll just give you an example of at lockdown, there's a young guy who's a baker in a place called White City in Soweto, and Refilwe contacted me some time ago looking for some help. I help a whole bunch of these township entrepreneurs. Sometimes I invest in them. He contacted me, wanted some help getting access to flour from one of the big companies, and he was selling about 200 loaves of bread a month, and relatively small little operations selling locally. And lockdown happened, and a lot of his loaves were unsliced loaves going into the quarter traders. The fast food outlets were closed. So Refilwe immediately took his offering of rolls and cakes and bread and put it onto Facebook with a little ad on Facebook, and invited people to send him their order on WhatsApp, including their location. And then he employed 5 guys who had trolleys and an umbrella, and they would go to these pin locations where they would receive the WhatsApp order from, sometimes walking up to 15 kilometers a day, delivering bread in the surrounding townships. And today he's got 3 containers and he's doing 2,000 loaves of bread. And he says he'll be on 10,000 loaves of bread by February. And doing really, really well, partly, through the contacts where he's been able to get terms on his product, in his flour, and get better pricing and so on. But also, it's this adaptation to using technology. And, I say to people, you don't say to people, send me your location, because you live in the location. You say to people, send me IPIN. IPIN is what a location is. And, people like Google Maps should say, should register the term IPIN, because it's going to be more popular than sending me your location. But this use of technology, particularly Facebook and WhatsApp, has grown dramatically. And the other thing that's grown dramatically is local delivery. So those hawkers that I spoke about selling vegetables, what we've seen is them moving to, because taxi ranks had lower footfall where they normally trade, they started using trolleys where they've got a little bicycle hooter and they go boop, boop, boop as they go down the streets, and they're selling door to door. And it always used to exist, but never at a scale. Now, there's these guys doing deliveries. There's a Kota outlet, a guy called Rulani, who started a business called Kota King. And he's now doing deliveries, and it costs you 5 Rand per delivery to deliver your Kota. So the point is that people are using Facebook and WhatsApp. I've got a photo of a Somali trader in downtown Joburg on 3 smartphones at the same time, one on his ear and the other 2. He's phoning a wholesaler to get pricing. He's at the shop checking the price at the shelf checking the price on shelf, and on the other 2 is on the internet checking out pricing. So we have this thing of in essence appropriate technology where people are utilizing things like WhatsApp and Facebook in their own means. They're utilizing the internet. And this is growing incredibly fast. I mean, one of the other businesses I'm involved in is called Moya Messenger, which is a data-free messaging platform. And we've now built Moya Paid, which is a data-free payment platform. The point is that there's a move really dramatic, fast by these businesses to move into using this technology. And to the Yebo Fresh, what piqued my interest with Yebo Fresh and I'm involved and so on with Yebo Fresh. But when Jessica contacted me to help give some advice, I was like, I've been watching you, because this thing of delivery and utilizing things like WhatsApp ordering platforms was growing before lockdown. But what happened is lockdown just fast-tracked that, not only worldwide, but even in the township spaces, and especially in the township spaces, because the cost of transport, the inconvenience and portability issues of using a taxi, you pay the penalty of a second seat for your groceries on the way home. These have all meant that, kind of going to the formal sector, traveling to go and do your shopping is increasingly seen as a major pain point. And there's going to be a lot more action in that space around using basic technology and particularly low data technology with delivery.
Peter Friedman asks, have you ever thought of owning an MVNO?
I was involved in... There's a church called the Shembe Church in KZN, which is like the ZCC. They have about 3 million members. And I tried to set up I helped a company set up an MVNO there. So I know a fair amount about it. The answer is no. I think the real opportunities are kind of probably in this data-free space, but also in terms of more apps than networks, the ability to do a variety of things on app kind of platforms.
GG, in your speech in the Drakensberg, I really was blown away by the whole thing. It was incredible. But you gave an example of a gogos on the side of the street selling, it was one product, I can't remember what it was. And then she built it up slowly. And then you gave the numbers, her revenue, versus somebody who has to travel an hour or 2 hours every day to work as a domestic servant in a wealthy township.
Yeah.
And it's quite extraordinary because when you drive past these people in the street selling things, you think they must be desperately poor. But give some examples of how good they are trading and the money they make.
I've probably got two specific ones. The one is a Gogo Delicious, I call her. She's in downtown Joburg. So you basically take the Gautrain, which is like a space shuttle, and then you walk through Park Station, which has had a 400 million rand upgrade. And this is this gleaming station, and then you walk into Lagos, or it feels like Lagos, which is kind of Van Willig Street in downtown Joburg, and there's a multitude of people selling amagwinya or vetkoek in that space, and one of them is Gogo Delicious, who I wrote about, and her husband sell 3,000 vetkoek every single day for R1 each. They also sell 500 rands worth of polony, cheese slices, tilapia, tea, and coffee. So they turn over 3,500 rand a day, 6 days a week. They pay 25 rand a month storage cost at a local wholesaler. And they only pay 25 rand because they buy 40 bags of Supreme flour, 12.5 kg, 40 bags of 12.5 kg Supreme flour a week from the wholesaler. And their margin is about 50% of that. And so they're making around 1,500 rand a day, and they're building a 2-story house in Meadowlands in Soweto, and we kind of walk past them and we go, oh shame, and across the street from her is a young 25-year-old who sells 6,000 vetkoek a day for R1 each, and now employs her brother and 3 others, and that's literally within 50 meters of each other. My other story is about a woman who sells snacks and lunch in a school in Tembisa. Now, most township schools, you don't have pocket money. You don't have a lunchbox. you get what's called ikeri, which is pocket money, and you will buy from these mamas in the schoolyard, whether it's a gorda or shwams or gips. The various snacks have all got names and so on. Gip is like popcorn because chickens eat popcorn, so they go gip. And then shwam is like a knick-knack kind of product because it goes shwam in your mouth. And so on. So anyway, she sells these. I was chatting to this woman. She was sitting on an upturned bucket with sitting on a plank on top of an upturned bucket. And I said to her, "How long have you been selling here?" She said, 26 years. I was like, 26 years sitting on that upturned bucket and plank. She said, "I put 2 children through university selling from here, and my children have been unemployed the entire time." And I put 2, and my husband's been unemployed the entire time. And so I started chatting to her about how much she makes, and she makes 6,500 Rand a month profit from her little table. And put that in perspective, there's 12,000 township schools, average of 5 women per township school. Let's say they earn 3,000, that's 60,000 women making 3,000 Rand a month each. That's a 2 or 3 billion Rand sector. So you're just all adding up. But the fun thing about her is, I test this thing that, there's a perception that people would, if they got a formal job, they'd leave the informal sector and they would take the formal job, which is absolute rubbish. There's no sense of the pride and appreciation people have for these jobs. So I'm always testing it. If I gave you a job, would you take it? So I said this to her, and she said, "What would I do in Dodana? Would I come to your house and wash your underpants?" And she put it perfectly in perspective, because she could be a domestic servant earning the minimum wage for domestic servants, 3,000 or 3,500 Rand a month, or 20 Rand an hour. This woman works for 3 hours a day, first break, second break, and after school. She earns 6,500 Rand profit a month. She could be riding for an hour in a taxi to work for 8 hours, riding a taxi home, never see her kids, and earn 3.5 grand a month. And this is the absurdity about, we don't recognize and don't give dignity to people in the sector on the one hand. On the other hand, we have these ridiculous unemployment figures because we don't measure informal jobs, and we don't also measure income. So for argument's sake, the backroom rental sector in South Africa is worth 20 billion Rand a year. So this 20 billion Rand of incomes received by township household for residential rental of these backrooms. Over and above that, most of the spaza sector is now immigrant traders like Somalis and Ethiopians. They rent their stores from the South Africans. There's a further 25 billion Rand a year in rental paid by these spazas to South Africans. So 45 odd billion Rand a year in rental incomes are received by South Africans. That's not measured. And the same, this woman on her plank, the Gogo Delicious, the Gorda outlets and so on, none of these are measured. And
GG, they do pay, obviously they pay a lot in VAT, but they don't pay formal tax. They don't, put in their papers to the IRS.
I get asked this all the time.
And I don't blame them.
Yeah, they don't pay tax. So I think that the first thing, as you said, they all pay VAT. The other thing is that we have to consider their economic contribution to Unilever, Tiger Brands, Parmalat, the fresh produce market or the agricultural sector. And I sincerely hope that Tiger Brands is paying the full amount of tax they should on the purchases made by Gogo Delicious and so on. Which so anyway, but put that aside. I think the important thing to consider with this and the whole concept of tax and stuff is twofold. Or threefold probably. Very few of these places would most of them would pay tax if they saw a benefit. Like you and I, they would see if they got education, they got services, they got permission to trade where they trade, formal permission, they would pay this. The other part of it is that we need to consider the massive contribution these people are paying to the economy in terms of feeding their families, buying products, creating livelihoods, extending their homes, and supporting the building industry, which is another massive sector, and I really believe that we'd have a revolution of unimaginable scale if we didn't have this informal sector, because the formal sector is not employing them. The government, is giving very small social grants. A 350 Rand unemployment grant. That's not even one day's trade of my woman who's selling in a school in Tembisa. So our economy, if we look at our economy, there's no way that our economy is being sustained just by those people who have formal jobs. I think there's 8 million odd of them. My argument is that the millions of people in the informal sector are sustaining economies, supporting the malls, buying products, and most importantly, feeding their families and stuff. And the fact that they're not a drag on the economy and actually a stimulus on the economy is one of the most important things out there.
Two questions. So one comment and one question. A great comment that you made is the informal settlement is the next suburb. And I get it, and I agree with it. They just are going to improve and improve and improve. But my question to you is, these extraordinary people, these entrepreneurs, Professor Carlos Lopez, who's one of the great economists on Africa, says, there need to be more African corporates. What's the incentive, or is there a skill required to take, a multiple spaza owner or a wholesaler or distributor of large numbers to a bigger level to become a big corporate? Is there an incentive to do it? Or is there a disincentive to scale, which might even be that the government then comes and taxes you?
No, look, I think that business has changed. And if you look at the gig economy and Uber and so on is a multitude of small businesses, or Airbnb, the same, a multitude of beds or bedrooms available that are aggregated through technology, through a payment platform as well as an ordering platform in essence. And I think that the real opportunity in this space and across, and in Garcinomics Revolution, I wrote about African economies as well, Nigeria and so on, and other examples. Throughout Africa, and even more so in South Africa, the real opportunity is around building aggregated businesses. So not so much franchise as much as aggregated. So as an example, if we look at Baragwanath taxi rank, there's almost 1 million people footfall every day going through Baragwanath taxi rank. There's about almost 500 probably hawkers in Baragwanath taxi rank who all take a taxi or a truck to the fresh produce market, to a wholesaler, to China Mall, whatever it is, to go and buy their products. If we could aggregate them into an ordering and payment system, and in essence, we would be able to negotiate terms and so on and so forth. And I believe that that's where the real opportunities lie in terms of the sector, is in essence, is how do we rather than building one super spaza, how do we connect these spazas up in a kind of aggregated, loosely aggregated model? Because part of what makes them work is that they are owner managers, and they manage that thing, as you and I would know, as efficiently as possible as an owner does. They're not employed, they're not a ShopRite where they're purely working there. They're more, so. And if you look at what the Somalis have done with the spaza sector, I mean, there's wholesalers in the spaza sector, in that broad spaza sector, that are turning over 450,000 Rand a day, 6.5 days a week. And these wholesalers, how have they done it? They've actually joined together in a loose kind of a grouping where they've got shares in each other's businesses, they purchase for each other's businesses, and they've really destroyed the South African spaza sector on the one hand, and on the other hand, they've given Pick and Pay, ShopRite, Spar and Co. a real run for their money by doing what you're describing. And I mean, they're proper businesses, VAT registered, CIPC registered, accountants and so on, running sometimes 15 to 20 supermarkets and aggregating that. And the same in the fast food sector. You see quite a lot of Gota outlets starting to do it. So the problem is, the biggest problem here, and I wrote about this extensively, is that it's almost impossible for these guys to get financing for their businesses of any form, whether it's a small business or a larger business. And it's almost impossible to register your business. It takes 40 days to register a business in South Africa. It takes 4 days in Rwanda. I sold my business Minanawe, and I started as I am now in this kind of smaller business. I needed a VAT number. It took me, my accountant had to go with me to SARS in Randburg, and we sat for 6 hours in a queue waiting to have a 5-minute interview with a consultant who then said, yes, you can have your VAT number. Now, you can't say, well, people aren't registered for tax or VAT and stuff like that, and then put burdens like that. I ran a business, 100 million rand business. I had financial directors and so on and so forth. Suddenly, I was forced into going to apply for VAT myself and experienced what the average small business does. I'm educated. I've got a financial background. Can you imagine a spaza shop trying to do a VAT thing where they leave their shop for 6 hours and have to pay the accountant for the 6 hours?
This is where technology comes in. And, people talk about health tech, edutech, fintech, but there's another tech called reg tech, regulation technology, which is going to change. These technologies are the greatest hope for South Africa and Africa. They're going to leapfrog these crazy, ridiculous regulations. Yeah. But what made me smile while you were talking is, I'm a libertarian, so I believe in tiny government, that get government out of the way. If you're rich in this country, you have your own borehole, your own solar for electricity, your own private security, you educate your kids privately. What do the government do for us? They just get in the way. But for this incredible Kasinomics crowd, the government's in their way as well. They're operating in spite of government. We operate in spite of government. Let's get the government out of the way.
Most of them are like, they don't even apply for anything from the government. They don't even try. In fact, the Department of Small Business Development, which must be one of the most useless departments in the country in terms of doing what their job is. I mean, they gave out a COVID grant of 7,500 rand, which, I mean, it's ridiculous anyway, but 7,500 rand, but they only gave it out if you were CIPC registered and you were 100% South African. I don't know what 99% South African is. And they had the most crazy forms that you had to fill in for this. And then I got one of the banks who was funding this thing, phoning me and saying to me, one of the executives saying, GG, how can we? Oh, and then they said that they're only giving it to spazas. I was like, this is the flipping problem. Everyone thinks that the only businesses in townships are spazas. They don't think of fast food. They don't think the auto sector. They don't think. So guess how many? So then in fact, on a webinar, I said, which this Department of Small Business Director General or someone was on, I told them how ridiculous it was and how they weren't going to get it and get any applications. And they were like, no, we're already getting thousands of applications. A year later, they spoke at Parliament and said, well, we got 7,500 or 10,000 applications that we've approved most of. 10,000 out of hundreds of thousands of township businesses that could have had help. And partly is that, there's too many hoops to jump through. But more importantly, you know what? A quarter outlet that's turning over 50,000 rand a day just doesn't bother about this. They carry on. They trade in cash. They're doing very well. Thank you very much. And they're proud of their business. They don't actually need help. Who
needs government? We don't need government. There's some great comments down here. Peter Lipworth, what about Kasi Tech? Which makes me think, GG, you must have an idea a minute. I mean, every time you're showering or swimming where you can't write anything, you must think of new, brilliant ideas. How do you must have people throwing money at you to invest in these incredible businesses.
Well, not really, but so I'll tell you what I've done. I sold my business, and I've decided that I'd sold enough cheese slices and washing powder and bank accounts for most of my life. So I've actually been investing in township businesses myself and in little startup businesses. Because most of the investors out there are kind of, I want proof of concept. It's like, would you have had proof of concept? And I want to know the business case. I want data. I want reliable data to show me how much
title deeds, IP.
Like, I've invested in whether it's equity or actual investment in a range of businesses. One of them is a range of herbal African muti products, very high end. Ispetu Sempilo, which means source of health.
Teddy, will you write that on there? Because I can't spell it.
They're 100%. Oh, well, you can. There's a website, sourceofhealth.co.za, but a range of sauces that, including chakalaka sauce, which is a township kind of sauce product, and so because I've kind of said, you know what, whenever I talk to people wanting to get into this space, I end up like, you know what, I'm never going to go anywhere. Let me just get involved with it or start it myself. And I've really focused on that kind of thing. And in fact, many years ago, I was asked by a journalist, I had all of these amazing case studies. I've launched Kellogg's Noodles in South Africa, part of a Nigerian business, which been huge, and so on, many other, apart from cheese slices. And this journalist said, are these amazing case studies because are successful because of your insights? I said, no. I just needed a brave client. When I went to Parmalat and I said to Kathy Eve, let's put cheese slices inside quarters, she said, yes, Gigi, I don't know how I'm going to convince the French, but, let's try it anyway. By the end of it, the French were saying, are there quarters in Tanzania? Are there quarters in Zambia? Can we launch it there? You needed someone who, no one was fired for designing a Corolla.
So true. Tell us one of the craziest ideas you've seen out there. And also give us an idea 10 years or 5 years hence of something that could come out of these extraordinary entrepreneurs that might even change the country or change the world.
So look, I think I saw a few comments just out of the corner of my eye about technology. I do think that technology is going to transform the space, and it's going to be across multiple sectors. And technology is in essence going to do things like payment, aggregation of orders, and so on and so forth. So it doesn't matter which sector. I mean, if you just look at the backroom rental sector, there's a fairly innovative little business called Indlu that is now doing funding of backroom rental building and so on. And using different ways of managing that. If you look at a business called Transaction Capital, who fund the taxi industry. I mean, they're extraordinary. And you know what they do? They don't work out, show me your audited statements to tell me your affordability of buying a new Quantum. They have tracked every single taxi route in the country. And if you come along and say, I want to fund a taxi, they say, okay, well, which is your association and which is your route? Are you going from Khayelitsha to center of Cape Town? You can afford a Quantum. Here's the money. Oh, no, you're going from Khayelitsha to Gugulethu. That route will only earn you so much. You can buy a GWM or a second-hand Quantum or whatever it might be. We have to use different ways of looking at these things. And to that point, the second thing, apart from technology that's going to liberate the space, is financing, is forms of financing these businesses. And that's simple financing. Some of it's capital financing. A lot of it is things like cash flow, or giving terms. Buy today and pay us in 3 days' time. I've got a youngster in Soweto called Gopano. I helped get some terms from a chicken supplier who imports the chicken because the South African chicken suppliers didn't want to work with the likes of Gopano. And rest my case on that one. And I lent him some money to handle cash flow. He was selling 20,000 rands worth of chicken in November 2019 to 30 outlets in Soweto. Today, Gopano sells 1.2 million rands a month's worth of chicken to 80 outlets in Soweto. To 80 outlets, he's selling 1.2 million rand a month. And all that's happened in essence is that he's been able to source product and get terms of 7 days. And they helped him with a refrigerated vehicle that he's paying off, and I helped him with some cash flow. I mean, and I'm talking 50,000 rand or 100,000 rand. I'm not talking a million. And this kid has gone from that to another space. There's a guy who sells potatoes in Alexandra Township who was doing about 15,000 rand a month. I helped connect him. One of my other businesses is that I'm involved in is supplying potatoes through one of the agents with terms in the Joburg Fresh Produce Market. And this youngster called him Netisi, we got him terms of like 5 days. He buys on a Thursday, pays back on a Monday kind of thing. He went from 15,000 rand a month to 40 outlets, where he's now selling 225,000 rand a month's worth of potatoes. Imagine if we multiply that in this country. I mean, at 225,000 rand, he's making 20% margin on that. He went from earning 2,500 rand a month to 40,000 rand a month, kind of story, and just these simple little things. And we should be building kind of financing platforms that allow you to.
And creating role models, because if somebody suddenly makes it big, you can go, wow, he's not that smart. I could do it too. Let me give it a go. There's a good question from Sam Rousseau, who says, do you believe that the advancement of tech will come greater regulation and a move to formalize the economy? Or is tech helping to keep the whole thing under the radar? Will the government say, aha, let's try and regulate and tax and then stuff things up?
Look, the government will try. I mean, aren't they doing that with Airbnb in Cape Town and solar? Airbnb worldwide, Moscow, Amsterdam, New York, they're trying to, how do we regulate it? So they'll try that kind of stuff. I don't think they'll ever get successful because technology is a little bit too slippery. So I don't think so. But I do think that certainly government wants to formalize the economy. They don't understand anything else. They want to bureaucratize it, not formalize it, so they want to bring in barriers and hoops and that kind of thing. The reality is that they'll never get it right. I mean, they won't get it right. If they can't put rapists in prison, or presidents in prison, how are they going to get the how are they going to formalize this? And I think that the sector needs to formalize in some ways, but in essence, it's about how do you get more systems in place? How do you get more technology in place? How do you, these kind of things, not the formalization as in bureaucratization, and one of the things I think the government should do is bring back something similar to the old CCs, the closed corporation. They're currently, it's one thing fits all. You got to register PTY, CIPC, and so on. We need different levels and tiers of formalization that are built on incentives. If you register for this thing, you will get the following benefit. Currently, it's just a stick. And so people ignore it. I do think that technology, things like WhatsApp as an example, are technology that will never be regulated. And if it does get regulated, people move on to another messaging platform and so on. So it will allow it to democratize.
Peter Friedman says you should set up a township stock exchange for all of this. Will be massive, which is a good idea. The other option is that you set up some form of investment vehicle, because for the average punter to sort of pick the one winner out of thousands of great ideas going on in this Kasi economy is too hard. Whereas you might be able to pick, the two best automotive businesses, the two best go-go driven retail businesses. And then maybe that's, you create the portfolio effect. You'll probably get a lot of capital behind you for identifying the good ideas.
Yeah. So Rob, I think there's a real, I believe that if you look at the microfinance industry, the personal unsecured microfinance industry, I mean, it's a complete ripoff. It costs you 5% per month interest for the first loan of the year and 3% per month for the second loan of the year. And I've done some work with the microfinance industry. And one of the things I believe is that there's a massive opportunity to create microfinance for businesses. Lower interest rates, but it's unsecured microfinance. If you look at how personal microfinance grew, the likes of Capitec, let alone everyone else in that sector, they made millions out of it. But I think that there's a real need for this in the small business space or the informal business space. In essence, unsecured, and I use that in inverted commas because it's unsecured in terms of typical formal forms of security. But it doesn't mean most of those small businesses operate from a residential premise that is owned by the person who's running the business. That is not a risk to invest in that business and so on. So I think there's a real opportunity around this kind of small business investment and unsecured lending, the next Capitec in my mind would come from someone who builds this kind of stuff. I don't know enough about it. I've written about it. I believe there's a massive opportunity. I'm doing it informally with these guys I'm talking about, and the results are extraordinary. So,
I tell you the good news?
Yeah.
Out of this audience, I guarantee there are 5, 6, 7 people going, I'm going to do that. How do I get a hold of GG? Are you okay if people contact you? You're going to get a lot of...
During lockdown, Cyril Ramaphosa announced this 300 billion rand credit guarantee scheme, and I was doing work for one of the big banks, building them some low-end business small business banking products, which have been very successful. And I said, hey guys, why don't you take this 300 billion rand credit guarantee, and we offer loans. Most people want a loan of between 10,000 and 25, maximum 50,000 rand. And most of them are actually wanting rotating credit. They're wanting to be able to buy and pay you back. It's shorter term and so on. This is one of the top big banks. I said, let's do this thing. I was working with one of the top executives there. They were like, Gigi, brilliant idea. We'd have the credit guarantee, but we cannot give a loan under 500,000 rand. We are not geared to do this. We don't understand how to do this. And it would cost us more to manage this kind of thing. So I went to the guys at the Microfinance Association. I went to the chairman. I've done some work for us. I said, hey guys, here's an opportunity. They were like, yeah, let's they call it development finance. I don't know why. But anyway, they said they put a committee together, and I attended 2 of their committees. And it was purely to help, I wasn't making a rand out of it. They put a committee together, and after the 3rd committee meeting, I gave my apologies, and there it is. So, yeah, but what an opportunity in that space.
In GG, your font of knowledge, the way you grew up, your experiences and your knowledge of the language and the culture put you in a unique position. And, you've been very kind to come on our show, and have this discussion, but I want to make it, give back as well, pass the goodness back and forward. Obviously, your books have been huge bestsellers, Kasinomics, and I'm sure you're working on your next book, but is there something, a project, an idea, a business that you'd like to mention that I can then pass on to all our family in the S group to get behind? Is there something you'd like to put out there? And I didn't prepare you for this. You might not have it, and you can send it to me afterwards if you want to. But do you want to leave a thought or an opinion? Buy the book, folks. Buy the book. But here's the second thing.
So by the way, the books I wrote 3 books. The first one's about growing up in Msinga. It's kind of no one ever believes it's true. And then Garcinomics and Kasinomic Revolution. And Garcinomic Revolution is probably the pick of the bunch from a business perspective. Rob, I'd rather say this. I mean, I think most of the business I'm involved in are probably at a level where they're kind of startups and they all need funding. The founders are looking for that kind of thing. I believe that, and I'd more than happily engage with anyone who wants to contact me directly. All my details, my email stuff is on my website, which is ggalcock.com. I would put it this way. I would rather work with people who are wanting to get involved in new startups or new things, whether it's a credit thing or other kind of things. And I've done this across the board of kind of saying, don't pay me, but I would like a tiny share of whatever it might be, and let's put something together. Because I really think there's opportunities there. And on the one hand, for me, I did very well out of selling my business. I probably lose all the money on these funny startups I'm getting involved with. But, I think that the real opportunity is, how do we transform the economy? How do we play this forward? And that's really what I've been doing, is like, lending the guy the money to buy the potatoes, is kind of paying it forward in terms of, if I make a difference to his life, and then hopefully he pays it forward and so on. And I really believe that we've got a responsibility to help these capitalists, I guess, who are outside of government, and how do we build either businesses that support them or support these businesses, and at the same time make make millions ourselves. I really think that these reciprocal business relationships exist. One of them really, really is in this financing of these small businesses, unsecured business lending. I know the regulator has all sorts of rubbish about it, but you can get around these things. You just become what they call a mashonisa, Anyway, so please contact me if anyone's interested. But I'd say, to a large extent, how do we build these reciprocal relationships? And people in business, how do you, in some way or another, bring in informal businesses? Not by procuring from them. I think that's rubbish. It's about how do you build a reciprocal business relationship. Government talks about how do we procure from BEE and small businesses. That never works. Never ever will work. Power relations are all wrong, and so on and so forth. So, but how do you? There are other ways to do it, which I can share, and that can really transform businesses and our economy.
GG, what's given me the greatest heart that's come out of this, and you're always inspiring, and you always make me feel good whenever we speak, is that it sounds like the great majority of our countrymen and countrywomen are capitalists at heart. And to me, that's a wonderful thing. GG, thank you very much. You really are a star.
Thank you. And they're positive, and they're transforming the country and ignoring the rest of us, carrying on with my...
Good for them. GG, see you soon, and thanks, Faye. Really great. Fantastic. And Lauren, roll the credits.